Imagine being able to sort of see into the future of your own health. What if you could get a significant head start? Years, maybe, on a serious disease, long before you even felt anything was wrong. For something like cancer, well, you can picture how completely game-changing that would be. Well, today on the deep dive, we're looking into some honestly groundbreaking research. It suggests this whole idea, which sounds a bit sci-fi, is actually getting closer to reality. Our mission really is to unpack what's in this new scientific article. We want to share the key insights, maybe some surprising facts, about how the very, very earliest signs of cancer are now being found in blood, years before a diagnosis.
Yeah, the basic idea itself, it isn't totally new. Scientists, well, they've known for a while that cancer cells shed these tiny bits of their DNA into your bloodstream. We often call it ctDNA, circulating tumor DNA. It's almost like breadcrumbs left by the tumor. But the huge challenge, the thing that's always been tough, is finding those tiny amounts right at the beginning, when the cancer's just starting and the signals are incredibly faint.
Right, that's exactly it, isn't it? Finding those genetic fingerprints when they're barely even there, that's been the holy grail, really. So what was different this time? How did this new research manage to tackle that specific challenge?
Well, the really astonishing thing, the part that even surprised the researchers, is that they could actually spot this tumor DNA in blood samples taken more than 3 years before the person was diagnosed. Dr. Yuxuan Wang, she's a lead researcher from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, reported this in Cancer Discovery. She even mentioned her own shock at finding it that early.
3 years. Wow, that is genuinely astounding. I mean, I can see why that would be a shock, because thinking about it, you're not just looking for a needle in a haystack at that stage, are you? Oh, not at all. It's much harder. Think about like one specific molecule in a giant swimming pool. These newly formed tumors, they're tiny, really small. So they only shed infinitesimal amounts, truly tiny traces of this DNA into the blood. And trying to pick out those few specific cancer DNA fragments from, well, all the normal healthy DNA that's also floating around, that's incredibly difficult.
And that difficulty, that's exactly where the sheer potential of this really hits you. We're talking about detecting cancer before any other signs, no symptoms, nothing. Dr. Wang said it would dramatically change outcomes for our patients. And when you think about that, it's not just getting diagnosed a bit earlier. It could mean completely different treatments, maybe localized ones, maybe fewer side effects, perhaps even preventative therapies. Imagine catching a tumor when it's so small you can just remove it surgically, minimal fuss. That's not just a head start, is it? It almost makes it a different disease altogether.
Yeah.
Okay, so given how big a deal this is, the obvious question, for me anyway, is how? How on earth did they actually manage it? What was the method?
Right. It's quite a clever approach, actually. They used this amazing resource blood samples that were collected way back. We're talking the 1980s and 1990s. These samples came from a long-term study, one that's been tracking people's health for decades. So first, they looked at samples from 26 people who got a cancer diagnosis within 6 months after their blood was drawn. And even then, in that initial group, they found genetic signs of cancer in 8 of those 26 samples, months before the official diagnosis. So that was already promising. But then, yeah, they took an even bigger step.
Okay, and that bigger step was looking at samples taken more than 3 years before diagnosis. That's really pushing the envelope.
Exactly. That's where it got really challenging. To do it, they needed a very specialized technique. It's called whole genome sequencing. It's a powerful method. It lets you basically map out the entire genetic code in that sample, all the DNA letters. And crucially, this allowed them to spot these tiny hallmarks of cancer DNA, specific genetic changes or mutations linked to cancer. They could find them even when they were present at such incredibly low levels that, honestly, other standard lab tests would have just missed them completely.
And what makes it even more impressive, you were saying, is the state of these samples, right? These are blood samples, maybe 40 years old, stored in tubes that weren't even designed to preserve DNA that well.
Precisely. And they only had about a teaspoon of plasma, the liquid part of blood, to work with for each person. It's almost like a scientific detective story.
Yeah, working with old evidence not meant for this kind of analysis.
Right. So the fact they got any clear results, let alone finding signals years in advance with such limited and, frankly, degraded material, it really suggests that if you used newer samples, larger amounts, collected and stored with modern methods designed for DNA preservation, well, these tests could potentially be much, much more sensitive.
So this isn't just interesting lab work then. When you think about the real world side of it, what even a few months earlier diagnosis means, let alone years,
Yeah.
that's where the impact really starts to become clear for patients, for treatment.
Absolutely. It's potentially transformative. There's a gastroenterologist, William Grady, from Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center.
Hmm.
He looked at this research and called the early detection pretty provocative.
Hmm.
He even sort of mused about this almost Star Trek-style future.
Perfect future, okay.
Yeah, where maybe patients who show these traces of tumor DNA could get some kind of therapy, something that would just eliminate those precancerous cells before they turn into a full-blown serious cancer. It's a
Yeah.
complete different way of thinking about it. Proactive, not reactive.
Okay, that Star Trek vision sounds amazing, obviously. But let's bring it back down to earth a little. Grady himself noted this is probably still years away, right?
That's right. Definitely years away. This study, you have to remember, was what we call a proof of concept. It showed it can be done. The absolutely crucial next step, and Dr. Wang's team is already working on this, is validation. They need to test this in a much larger group of people.
Right, see if it holds up on a bigger scale.
Exactly. You need to confirm the results, check the accuracy, understand the limitations. But they are moving forward because, as Dr. Wang said, the results are promising enough that we're going to go back and look at more patients.
Hmm.
So yeah, what we're seeing here is really remarkable progress, finding cancer at its earliest stages when it's potentially most vulnerable. This really could change the whole fight against the disease, shifting it, like we said, from reaction to, well, proactive intervention, giving people a real head start.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it actually mean for how we understand health, how we understand disease, if we can pick up these silent signals potentially years ahead of time? How might that shape everything? Medicine, prevention, even just how you and I think about managing our own health down the road. Imagine being able